Hello, friends. Welcome back to Spellhaven, a place where all are welcome. So come on in and let's learn to run D&D together. My name is Jaren, and this is another episode of D&D Behind the Scenes Campaign Prep Edition. As we're getting into, we're almost at the first session of my Unremembered Worlds campaign, my first homebrew campaign set in the Forgotten Realms, beginning here at Elturel. Last time we had dipped into this, I was talking a little bit about my initial individual session zeros that I've been having with players because I want to sort of intertwine these narratives more organically rather than just operate with the assumption that, yeah, you guys are an adventuring party looking for work, traveling along the road, you come across town, kind of bored of that, so I wanted to start in a different way. And so we're starting with this town of Elturel being attacked and all the characters sort of seeing it from a different perspective. And I'm intertwining the narratives sort of on my own so that it feels a little bit less presumptuous and forcing the players to come up with some reasons why they're traveling together. So today I thought I would get into how I run a session zero. I've already had one of them. We had this last night. It actually went really, really well, and I'm excited. And I think it's going to be easier than I thought to adjust and make these stories fit without having to retcon a bunch of stuff. So maybe I'll go over a little bit of that as well. So what I like to do for session zero, this has been pretty standard since the first one that I ever ran, is they're kind of divided up into three sections, and then we have a little bit of role play. I always like to role play at session zero to get a feel for the character. I think you really start to know who your character is, what their voice is going to be, what their personality is going to be, the more you role play them. You know, you can come up with all sorts of backstory, but I think all the nuances really start to come to life as soon as you sit down at the table and start role playing with it. So I like to have that in the session zero. So it kind of is divided into about three sections. I talk about what's different with the campaign, the themes, and some of those things, like what separates this from a different campaign. If you follow, for example, the Lazy Dungeon Master prep. The template I think Mike Shea uses is it talks about like the 5 truths of the campaign. What is unique about this campaign? What are facts about this world that are different? Here, it's a little bit unique in that a lot of what's different is stuff for the players to find out along the way. I do talk about, some of the themes of the campaign. I mentioned last night, and I'll mention that in my 2 sessions today. That this is definitely, we're getting back into high fantasy to establish right out from the get-go that this is different than Spelljammer. We're not going out into space. There's not a bunch of wacky stuff. I established that it's high fantasy because I want this to be a more serious campaign. So while we might get off the rails from time to time, joke around, talk about some memes or whatever, ultimately I want to bring it back in and let's have a serious sort of game style with a heavy role play. So that way, I know my group, I know that they're all going to be on board with this, but if you're running for a new group, get this out of the way at session zero, let them know what kind of campaign you want to run. So if they're not on board with that, they can go, you know what, I'd just rather run a game. I'd rather play in a game where we're just killing stuff, going through the dungeon all the time, and I just want to joke around after work. Sounds like you want to run something way more serious. Thank you for letting me know at session zero. I don't think this is going to be a good fit. It's that time to get all that stuff out of the way. So I let players know up front, yep, high fantasy, want it to be more serious, all that stuff. What's different about this setting, I've talked about this a little bit. Gods walk amongst us like regular entities, and this is considered normal. There's reasons for that. I can spoil that here. I'm assuming that none of my players are watching this. If you are, please stop here because you're about to ruin a bunch of stuff that I have prepped over the last month and a half. But this dates all the way back to what was it called? It was Karsus's Folly, back in the history of Netheril, which canon-wise, Mystra severed herself from the weave, cut off magic in order to prevent that from happening. I'm imagining a world in which all the gods kind of intervened and saw what was going to happen if that was allowed, and they all sort of played a part in preventing that from happening. And because of their direct intervention with mankind, they were punished. There were this alternate world was created by the overlord Ao, and said, look, if you love mankind so much, go walk amongst them, be among them. And so that's sort of why, in the process of that, them trying to prevent that, throwing a wrench in the spokes, metaphorically at the last minute, this world also features some weird anomalies that are happening with more and more frequency. So some things for the players to find out. I told the player this last night, and I trust that they can keep this separate. There are going to be things along the way. Your character might find out that the fact that gods are just everyday people is maybe a little different, and they might be able to figure out why this world's different along the way. So I also let them know there's going to be some clear character hooks in this session 0. So please follow it. I'm I don't want to have 3 or 4 sessions with everybody going their separate directions, and I don't think that's going to happen. But I just let them know up front. Please be cooperative and follow the hooks. I go over house rules. If anything's weird and different, or some things I want to set out from the get-go of how I'm going to rule things, this is where I do it. In this particular one, this section's a little bit shorter because this is my regular group. I've been DMing for them for 4 years, so they kind of know what to expect. But I do tell them, number one, rule of cool. If you want to try something, let me know what you want to try, and we'll figure out a way that you can roll to see if that happens. It might not be the outcome that you want, but we'll see if we can make it work for you. I'm wiping the table clean. I'll oftentimes in campaigns, I will come up with special rulings or things I want to try out. And it ends up being specific to that campaign. For example, last campaign, I tried some ruling that I think now is kind of weird about attacks of opportunity, because I thought they were extremely strong, and I tried to make up a ruling for it. I felt like it was a little bit overcomplicated, but here nor there, because this campaign we're starting from scratch. So the only real thing that's different here in terms of house rules, I'm trying something brand new. I think we're gonna still gonna do the regular +2 bonus on flanking. I should let them know that as well. That's just sort of been an assumed house rule that we've been keeping going for the last 2 or 3 campaigns. The one thing that's different, I'm starting them at level 1 and also giving them an additional hit die to roll at level 1 only. The reason being is level 1 is extremely squishy. It's just sort of how 5th edition is. You have a good chance of dying at level 1. You gotta be real careful in combat, and I wanted them to feel like they could afford to take some risks at level 1. So I had them starting hit points, which is your max hit die plus con mod, and then roll on top of that. My rationale being, it probably means the most at level 1. Then as they level up, it's going to mean less and less, right? Extra 6 hit points at level 1, amazing. Extra 6 hit points when you've got 100 hit points, doesn't really matter. You'll get that much in temp HP at some point. So that's the only real big house rule change with this campaign. I then talk about, I'm calling this section agreements, but it's really like expectations. I let the players know what I expect from them and what they can expect from me. It's a 2-way street, I let them know, and I would probably go into more detail with a new group, but my players, we've talked about these in the past. Know your character, know how their stuff works. I trust my players enough to not lie about that stuff and not BS it. I oftentimes, I'm not gonna have people roll on camera or roll, I'm playing digitally. I'm not gonna have them only roll in the app. If they're rolling physical dice at home, I trust them. And the same thing that I expect them to trust me, that I'm not doing a bunch of oops, another nat 20. Know what your character do, know what you're gonna do in combat, sort of be thinking and paying attention and planning ahead. Just let me know if you're not able to make a session. If you're ever unhappy with your character or the direction that you're going, let me know so that we can make changes. We'll definitely work on that. I want to have good communication, and I want players to be happy with their character. Oh, that is an alarm letting me know that I have my next one-on-one session 0 in 30 minutes. So let's continue. And then I talk about our safety tools. This is standard across the board for all of my campaigns. I use the lines, veils, and X card, or the let's talk about it. Lines is everything that we're just not going to have in the campaign. We're saying we're not crossing this line. It's just not something I'm going to have in the campaign. And for my group, I think we're okay with most things in terms of details of gore and violence. People are for the most part okay with that. But it's a living list. We can always adapt and change. But the things we're definitely not having: non-consensual sexual activity, graphic violence against kids or pets. I've got a cat. I don't want to do that in a campaign, and it's also kind of weird. Um, Topics of a political or social nature that are just a little too close to current events. Because guess what? I'm doing this for escapism too. Um, and then we'll talk about our veils, our things that, yeah, we'll have it in the campaign. We just might not go into detail on it. We'll say, okay, that happens. Pull curtain and scene. We'll just imagine that it happens. Fill in the details in your mind. Stuff like consensual sexual activity. I'm not going to describe that. That's not what we're doing here in our 5th edition campaign. Personally, I'm not super on board with role-playing romance between a player character and an NPC because I'm the one playing the NPC. I just don't really feel comfortable with it. So if that happens, we'll just we'll veil it. We'll say it happens off screen. Anything that's like close to fantasy racism, like, hey, they're not really kind to gnomes over here. Well, we might allude to it. We're not going to describe it on screen. It might be a thing in the world. We're not getting into detail with it. Again, see this point here. I don't want to do anything that's way too close to reality. Although it's a fantasy world, I realize these things might happen. And again, we can definitely add to these lists as the campaign goes along. It's a living list for all of us. And then the last one is hey, let's pause the game real quick. This is whenever the game gets uncomfortable, we accidentally cross a line, or we realize that there's a line that we didn't know about, or just things are getting a little weird. We can say, hey, can we just pause for a second to talk about this? Or it can even be someone messages me anonymously. Hey, I'm not comfortable with this topic. Can we not do this? They don't need to do it in front of everybody if they're not comfortable with it. They can just message me. This could also be maybe maybe a player's not on board with the direction the game is going. Maybe they're getting in a situation where they're like, hey, this is really putting my character in an awkward spot. Can we pause and talk about this before we proceed? Because I, the player, I don't like the way that this story is going. And I want to make sure that maybe someone else is not on board with it too, but at least I'm going to raise my hand and say, I'm not cool with this. Can we talk about it? It's just a chance to break the fourth wall, pause the game, and let's be adults and have a conversation and make sure that everyone's still enjoying the game. And again, that's not to say that constant enjoyment is the goal. I think there are definitely times where in the course of a heavily narrative game, things can be emotionally intense. You might not like the outcome in the moment, but that doesn't mean that overall it's not an enjoyable experience, right? When your character dies, that sucks, but maybe you pull back from it after the game and go, that was the way that it should have played out. And as much as it stuck in the moment, that told a great story, But I have this here. Let's pause the game real quick and talk about something if things ever come up. The agreements from my end, I will always indulge in whatever direction the party wants to go. I'll have the material. I'll prep and be ready to go on time every week. That's the bare minimum I think that anybody could expect their DM. And I will let you know ahead of time if things ever change. I let them know the default here is I will assume that you're okay with your character dying. I'm going to stay away from killing off NPCs in your backstory. I will assume that you're okay with your character dying. If it happens, I'm not going to try to kill characters just for fun because I'm not that kind of DM. But if that ever changes, if you ever get really attached to a character, and are thinking, I would really like to see where this story goes. I don't want some random fight killing my character. Can we please try to avoid that sort of stuff? Let me know, and we'll, I can certainly try to have the narrative side, not necessarily, Deus Ex Machina sidestep it, but in a more organic way. I'll at least know to try to avoid those sorts of things. And then let's role play. Let's have a session. Let's get ourselves used to our character. It's new mechanics, probably, maybe even a new class you've never played before. Like last night was our player's first time playing a ranger. And so there's new things and new features to figure out. Let's work all that stuff now in the session 0. So by the time we all get together as a group, we're a little bit more familiar. So that's how I do a session 0. I think you can do it however you want, but I think having one at all is better than not having one. So let's talk a little bit about the session 0. Last night we began in El Terrell with Neve. I have the name here. Yeah, Neve Gwindor, half-elf, wood-elf ranger. And we told a little bit of her story as she was on a commission to find this crystalline stag. Spent a good amount of time. Well, we started in a tavern in Kerrigan's Plate and Barrel, this tavern that she had found a room in, and did a little bit of role play, socially awkward character. It was super fun. Did a little bit of tracking on the outskirts of El Trail to try to find this crystalline stag. Tracked these cloven hoof prints back around the town and back into the town, and followed this scent back to the tavern, where she met the first NPC, Risa Longstrider, this half satyr girl that was had a weird condition of like turning invisible at unpredictable times. And so we ended with Risa taking this character, taking Neve to her hideout, but encountering another player as being chased through the town, and this slip of paper falling from a book that he was carrying. And it belonged to a character in Neve's backstory who she's looking for. And that's where we ended it, because now I have to do those character sessions today. So last night, I guess also in preparation, I'd already gone through and added all the music. I made some playlists because I want to do a little differently. Last few campaigns, I've had like specific tracks that I've enjoyed and they just kind of go on loop. I kind of want to do like generic playlists this time. So I'll have, you know, a playlist for overland travel that's, you know, 4 or 5 songs that just kind of goes on loop. So we're not listening to the same 3-minute piece for an hour. So I did that yesterday. It was one of my favorite times of the campaign because I get to go buy a bunch of new music and add that into Roll20. What else? So today's session zeros. Also, I wrote a little bit of a blurb for my initial introduction into the campaign. It's I think it's a good idea to start with a bit of a dialogue, or a bit of a monologue, rather, to set the tone and the pace, and get the player thinking about where we actually are. So I did a little bit of a description on El Trail yesterday, beginning where we're starting a few days prior to the Midsummer Festival. So today's session zeros. Oh, these are my notes from yesterday. I don't need that. What I need. Did I put it here? No. Where's my other notes? See, this is the other part, is being organized. No. I think it was in. Here we go. I really ought to be putting these in the character pages. Today we've got Rowan and we've got Aster. Rowan, we're beginning with a little bit of a dream about his backstory, escaping Racine, waking up to find himself in this little shack, I guess you could say, on the outskirts of El Terrell, which he has been staying at, belonging to somebody that he'd met, a buddy of his, named, oh gosh, it's in his story. Did I not put it in the notes? It's an NPC in his backstory. I will look up the name afterwards. Felton Harris, that's what it is, who is a merchant that has been kind of traveling up and down the river to and from Baldur's Gate. So he's going to have some things to take care of, a little bit of chatting with Felton Harris, eventually going into town, running some errands, arriving at his employer's location, Briggs and Chase Outfitters, which he works at as a leathersmith. Briggs and Chase is sort of an armory of sorts, basic armor, maybe leather attire and whatnot. Ending with an errand to deliver something to the High Observer Thavius Krieg in the High Hall, which is where, this murder mystery kicks off. And I'm imagining, I can't predict this. This may not be how it happens. Maybe Rowan just immediately gives himself up and gets arrested. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm assuming this character is not going to be happy with that and is trying to, make a good name for himself, especially because his family is under the watch and care of the High Observers, or the Companions, not the High Observer, the Companions. So I'm imagining he's not going to be wanting to be arrested, and I'm picturing this chase through town, and that's kind of where that story is going to end. We then have Aster, who is the child of the what is Aster's character's last name? Let's pull up this. Aster Strongroot. The Strongroot family is prominent in Elturel as they helped during the rebuilding after the Vampire Lord was ousted and the arrival of the Companion, that second son that hangs and looms over Elturel. His family helped. I don't know if it's him. It might be a her. Their family helped rebuild Elturel. They own a flower shop and a produce stall here in the market. The Loft and Vine shop here in close to the market. So I'm imagining this character starting out with helping out, running some errands, doing some work. Maybe he's searching the docks because this character is a paladin and probably wants to be the protector. So then maybe perusing the docks to see and keep the peace. I'm imagining at some point they follow this this creature that they kind of spot out of the corner of their eye, this little crystalline cat or something like that. And eventually encountering a much larger figure that sort of looms with casting this big shadow that is entirely crystal, and then adopts a more human form, takes that cat with him, and disappears through some dimension door or something like that. It's another one of the incarnates. It's getting into like the first big plot point of this first arc. So I'm imagining at some point Aster also sees this chase through town, sees Rowan being chased through town, maybe even recognizes that character from an earlier encounter earlier that morning, as I'm going to have Rowan delivering something to Loft and Vine. And probably knowing that Rowan is likely a good person, I'm picturing Aster steps in to protect, and that's kind of how these paths begin to cross. That said, maybe it doesn't go like that at all. I'm fully prepared to have to improvise a lot of this stuff, but that's kind of how I'm imagining it, and hopefully all goes according to plan, but you never know. It's D&D. All your plans go out the window as soon as you start rolling the dice, but that's the idea. That's going to do it, I think, for now. We'll probably have more to talk about in the next video. I'm thinking that we'll actually start our first session a week from today. So maybe next session will be a full-on prep for the session in which we start prepping monsters and encounters and stuff like that. We'll have to see. I have my fourth and final session 0 next Thursday. So we'll have to see. We'll wait and see. So thanks for watching. I'm going to give my voice a rest now because it is 5:45 and I have the next session in 15 minutes. So thank you for watching. This is Spellhaven. My name is Jaren, and we'll see you in the next one.